HBO's House of the Dragon has become one of the most talked about shows of the year, once again. After its fiery debut in 2022, the series has returned with its second season 2 years later, and it has thrown audiences right back into the thick of the building Targaryen civil war, with King Aegon II Targaryen, Alicent Hightower and the rest of the Greens on one side and Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, Sea Snake Corlys Velaryon and the Blacks on the other. As the first spin-off/prequel series after the end of Game of Thrones in 2019, House of the Dragon had a lot of work to do to repair the franchise's reputation following the divisive, to put it mildly, final season of its groundbreaking predecessor. Many factors have established House of the Dragon as a quality successor to Game of Thrones, but there's one specific arena in which the prequel series has run laps around the original Thrones show. Of course, we're talking about the dragons. Both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon have heavily relied on the awe and spectacle of their dragons in their marketing. However, the approach that House of the Dragon has taken to incorporating them into the show and its story has been much more effective in making them a crucial part of the show. Daenerys dragons in Game of Thrones. The three dragons of Daenerys Targaryen in the original Game of Thrones series were undoubtedly a big part of that show's spectacle. There were numerous, truly fantastic, and defining moments featuring all three of them. Whether that be the three of them, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, hatching from their eggs in the Season 1 finale, them leading Daenerys' fleet to Westeros at the end of Season 6, Viserion being revived as an undead ice dragon by the Night King in Season 7 or Drogon ultimately melting the Iron Throne in the series finale. Many of the most memorable and jaw-dropping moments from Game of Thrones were centered on the dragons. However, the trio of dragons seen in Game of Thrones were far from perfect. Firstly, they spend much of the series as adolescent creatures, leaving much of the grand spectacle to the latter seasons. This isn't a flaw exactly, as the growth of the dragons serves the larger story at work in Game of Thrones, but it does feel a bit strange that a show pitched so heavily on its dragons doesn't actually feature them as full-grown fire machines until its final couple of seasons. The bigger issue is the lack of balance between how these three dragons were characterized. It's no secret that Drogon was the dragon that got most of the attention. As the largest of the dragons and the one that seemed to be the leader of the three, most of Throne's best and most crucial dragon moments were given to Drogon. Additionally, the relationship between Daenerys and Drogon is consistently given the most development throughout the show, with both Viserion and Rhaegal left on the back burner. Drogon existed as the poster child of the dragons in the show, while Viserion and Rhaegal only really existed to add a bit more firepower. The only real memorable moment for either of them was Viserion's death and resurrection at the hands of the White Walkers. While that was a great moment and one of the defining events of the latter Thrones seasons, even it would have been much more effective on a personal level if Viserion had received more development as an individual dragon. House of the Dragon's focus on the dragons. Considering that Game of Thrones struggled to strike a balance between three dragons, there was some nervousness about House of the Dragon, which promised to introduce over a dozen new dragons into Westeros on-screen history. Throughout Season 1, fans were introduced to the likes of Caraxes, the Blood Wyrm ridden by Daemon Targaryen, Syrax, the Golden Dragon of Rhaenyra, and Vhagar, the enormous and ancient behemoth claimed and ridden by Aemon Targaryen. There have been many others sprinkled throughout both seasons, including Meleys, ridden by Rhaenys Targaryen, Sunfire, ridden by Aegon II, Moondancer, ridden by Baela Targaryen, Sea Smoke, ridden by Laenor Velaryon, and Vermax, ridden by Jacaerys Velaryon. Those are far from the only dragons seen on screen throughout House of the Dragon, and we expect to see more and more as the show continues to unfold. However, it is not the number of full-grown dragons in House of the Dragon that makes it better than Game of Thrones, it's the attention paid to developing them as individuals with specific relationships with their riders. Instead of them each having the same design with shifted coloration, as was largely the case with Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal, every dragon in House of the Dragon has its own unique appearance that sets it apart from the rest. This makes it substantially easier to tell the difference between the likes of Caraxes, Vhagar, Meleys, Sea Smoke, and all the rest. Most crucially, though, are the individual relationships that are put on display between these dragons and their riders. Whether it be through small moments like Sunfire nuzzling Aegon II's chest before they take off for battle, showing this to be one of the few positive relationships the king has, or grander events like Vhagar ignoring Aemon's commands and killing Lucerys and Eryx at the end of Season 1, these dragons are shown to have their own personalities. This makes them infinitely more likable, or detestable, and it adds a lot more to the stakes of the Dance of Dragons. For example, the fight between Meleys, Sunfire, and Vhagar in Season 2 felt like much more than just a CGI firefest because the audience wasn't just concerned for the human riders but also the dragons themselves. How this bodes well for the future of Hot D. The level of attention that House of the Dragon has been paying to the actual dragons in its story does more than make audiences care about them in the short term, it also builds a stronger foundation for the show to build on as it progresses into its third season and beyond. As the Dance of the Dragons continues to escalate, we will see many more battles of blood and fire in the skies. We've already gotten 2 incredible dragon fight sequences, with the Vhagar/Eryx fight at the end of Season 1 and the Meleys/Sunfire/Vhagar fight midway through Season 2. Given how many more dragons are already on the playing field and the more to come that were teased at the end of Episode 5 of Season 2, things are just beginning to heat up. Unlike Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon doesn't treat its dragons as vessels for a grand spectacle. While they may bring spectacle with them on many occasions, the show first treats the giant fire drakes as complete characters. Vhagar has an entirely different personality from Syrax, who is completely different from Caraxes and all the others. When these dragons are at each other's throats, nobody is cheering them on. It feels like a tragedy, and it's one that could have been avoided had cooler heads prevailed. House of the Dragon is streaming on Max.